UTSA football snapped its 2-year drought with a long-awaited conference road win. The soccer team wrapped up a remarkable season, and men's and women's basketball are heating up. We've got a lot to cover in this episode, so let's get started.
All right, this is episode 124 of the Hail Mary podcast. I'm the Toves, and as always, I'm joined by my wife, A. Toves. We're going to jump right into the soccer team because, again, I just feel like they're the one team that had I guess they're the ones that really had the most exciting game that we were looking forward to this past weekend. And, we should just kind of tie it up a little bit here. So, unfortunately, their historic season came to a close in Lubbock, where they lost in the first round of the Women's Cup tournament to Texas Tech 2-1, and they finished the season at 10-6-6. Jumping right into the game, Atovs, Peyton Parsons scores 13 minutes into the game off a short corner that just found her at the top of the penalty box, essentially alone, and she just unleashes this swerving strike that Kessler just could not stop. UTSA's defense was just a little slow in recognizing that she was by herself for some reason, because it was a short corner, but for some reason that threw off the UTSA, and I think a little bit could have been because of the fact that they came out in this 5-3-2 formation. So having 5 defenders back there, they don't normally do that. Now I understand why Derek Pittman did it. He knows what he's going to give up if he goes to the 5-3-2. He's going to be a little defensive. So, it kind of throws him off a little bit because maybe that's just part of their mindset.
Yeah, I thought when they came out and started this game, they seemed a little bit timid, which to me was a bit surprising because if you think about how we talked about them in the American Conference tournament, they came out just very focused. They looked very locked in. And in this game, it almost seemed like the moment was kind of big, and they just didn't seem to have that same look and determination that we've seen in other games. That doesn't mean that's really, what they were feeling, but it just kind of came across like maybe they weren't as focused as they had been in when they were playing, Rice and Memphis and UAB.
Yeah, and maybe it's the formation. Maybe it's just the fact that, as you said, you get into this moment and it's easy to say you're going to meet it no matter what, but it also felt like they wanted to feel out Tech, and they allowed Tech a little bit too much cushion, I thought, and instead of being a little bit more aggressive. So, for a long period of time, it's 1-0. UTSA is just absorbing pressure and possession from Tech. It just felt like Tech would eventually score that final goal and make it 2-0 to, end the game like that. And, it probably was going to be more because Tech just they kept making little mistakes, and they kept playing with their food a little too much. This will come up a little bit more when we talk about the UTSA football team in Charlotte, but especially here, it just felt like Tech they seemed off. And we have to credit UTSA. Obviously the defense played well. It's just that it also felt like Tech could have taken advantage of some other opportunities.
Yeah, I thought the other thing, we weren't really sure how it was going to play out in this game was that, Tech got knocked out of the Big 12 championship so early. So they actually had been waiting a while for this game. Meanwhile, UTSA had just played a game the Sunday prior. So it's kind of that question of, is UTSA going to be tired and Tech's going to be fresh, or is Tech going to be rusty and UTSA is still going to be, kind of rolling with momentum? And I think, it sort of seemed like UTSA came out a little bit tired maybe, and Tech was a little bit rusty too, so they scored on that first goal early, but then it just kind of seemed like they didn't quite have the drive and the juice that I was expecting to see from Tech either.
Yeah, that's fair, and maybe that's what it is. But I think, as UTSA fans, we'll take that conference tournament as opposed to getting knocked out, right? Because we wouldn't be here. So, yeah, so we get to the 60th minute, and Kessler takes a free kick from around midfield, and it's just it just feels random. Like she's just going to put it in the box and we'll see if we can get ahead on it. Maybe we can score. And essentially that's what you're looking for when you've got such a defensive formation. You're hoping for these just small opportunities to see if you can score off a free kick. We saw this when East Carolina played UTSA at Park West, where East Carolina just stayed back and they didn't really try to move forward too much. They would at times, but for the most part stayed back. So UTSA kind of employs about the same game plan here. But Kessler, I think for everything that maybe she was supposed to put it more into the box, but she just gets a hold of the ball and that thing it just goes and it finds the upper left corner. And Faith Wynn, the goalkeeper for Texas Tech, I thought maybe either misplayed it or I don't know what she was looking at because she just seemed to have lost track of the ball and it just gets past her. And we both look at each other and we're like, oh my God, we just scored. And Kessler, when she scores it, it's almost very much like she wanted to cover her mouth and go, oh my God. Like, what just happened?
I mean, she looked shocked that goal went in. Honestly, I don't think she expected it either.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a nice bookend because the very first exhibition game, the first goal of the season for UTSA is off a Kessler free kick, close to about the area where she took that one. So it kind of fits for this season where Kessler scores the first goal of the season in the fall and then scores the last goal of the season, that it's off a free kick. Again, it's Kessler. I mean, it was a good kick. That's all I'm going to say. I mean, it did what it needed to, which was rattle Tech, because as you've already kind of laid out, Tech has been on this sort of kind of waiting period to see where they're going to play or who they're going to play. In the NCAA tournament, they get UTSA, so they've got those legs, and the rustiness seems to like now catch up to Tech because it feels like they start pressing a little bit, and not in a good way. Like usually we talk about pressing, we're talking about defensive press, where you're going to pressure your opponent. This was more of a just passes were off, and it just looked like they were hurrying themselves, and I don't think wanted to get into an overtime with UTSA because I think they knew that UTSA would fall back even further on defense, and they weren't really going to get a shot at putting this game away during the regulation time. Unfortunately, 76 minutes comes, and we talked about Peyton Parsons early, and we previewed her during our preview, and then we also brought up Taylor Krzyzewski. And Krzyzewski receives the ball around the top of the penalty box. A-Tubs, I don't know what it is about Lubbock in the top of the penalty box, but for some reason, that just happened to be the sweet spot for Tech. Krzyzewski sets herself up and just takes a really nice shot. And it hits the left side of the netting of the goal. And Kessler had no opportunity to make a play on that. It's one of those shots that we've seen before from, UTSA at times. I know that Michelle Polo, I believe it was against South Florida, took a shot similar to that. It wasn't quite the setup that Krzyzewski did, but when Polo got a hold of it, I mean, as a goalkeeper, you're just stuck in a position where it's like, you can't defend it. It's just a tough shot. So Krzyzewski puts Tech ahead 2-1. And from there, UTSA just couldn't mount. And I don't know that they really wanted to go forward too much because that would open them up a little bit more. And, then you get the third goal and then all of a sudden, like everything's already lost. At that point, it just felt like maybe it was game over.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to feel bad about in this game. I mean, we played really well. It was a tough opponent. Certainly we just needed a little bit more offense. We needed to be able to take advantage of some of those opportunities. But, ultimately, I thought we played very well against, Texas Tech overall.
Yeah. You certainly want to see a little bit more offensive soccer, see them kind of diversify their attack a little bit. Because if you don't, then, Tech knows exactly what to expect. And a team of Tech's level, they're just gonna eat that up. Now, I will say, I've focused on the metric of shots on goal. That's usually what's creating the opportunities for teams. And Tech gets 9 shots on goal to UTSA's 4. And I think the cool part about it is that UTSA kept that at such a much closer, I think, margin than I was expecting. I thought Tech, at times, like I said, they were playing with their food, so they weren't really taking advantage of maybe getting those shots on goal that they probably should have. So if you look at the overall total shots, Like Tech just completely outshot UTSA, but you'll take that margin if your shots on goal is it's 5, and yeah, it's maybe a little bit too much, but it's still enough to where I think it gives you a shot to potentially stay in this game, maybe even win it. And that's what UTSA had, a chance to, win it or at least stay in this game. So in terms of players, I would say it's good to see Zoe May end her career with a strong showing. She had 3 of UTSA's 4 shots on goal. Obviously, the other shot on goal was Kessler, which is always weird to say because it's your goalie, but it happens from time to time. I thought Cam Closa had a good return to Lubbock. There were some other good performances I liked. The return of Casey Grauman kind of helped the outside backs for UTSA. Overall, other strong showings from Izzy Peters, who came in as the 5th defender. So, here she is kind of coming off the bench from time to time throughout the season. And then here she is in the Women's Cup and first round NCAA tournament, and she's starting and she plays a whole 90. And I thought she played really well. It's a sneak peek to the future of UTSA's defense, as Izzy Peters will most likely be, a stalwart back there. We also had Izzy Lane, who finishes her career. Just really nice showing from Izzy. Again, she's playing defense. And while she had some moments where Tech took advantage, she can't hang her head because, that's really not where she was supposed to be playing anyway, right? Like, she's supposed to be playing up top. Mm-hmm. And here she is showing her versatility once again, and she's playing in the back. And I thought she really held her form, as did Aaliyah Durden, though. I wish I knew what was going on with the field, because Aaliyah felt like she slipped a few times, and I was a little more concerned that would eventually cause an injury. Later on, she does go down with an injury, but I think she was okay. Didn't seem like it was too bad. But, when you see kind of moments like that, you kind of hold your breath, because the last thing we need is, for one of our players to, tear a muscle or do something, especially this late in the season. And then Leah Varela just being Leah Varela, she's just was annoying in the midfield. You could tell like the Tech players were just like, man, this small midfielder just keeps like being a pest and just getting in our passing lanes. And that's what she just does. She's a very good defender that way. She got off a couple of shots, but overall, just I thought good from the team. I don't know that we'll end up closing out soccer just yet. We may have maybe one more episode left to just kind of review the season and kind of go through that. But I will say, as a preview, just there's some talented attackers coming back. It's just a very young attacking group. So there's an opportunity here, as long as we keep some of these players, that they're just going to build and get stronger, faster, which will only help UTSA's scoring opportunities moving forward, as well as like midfield. Midfield's got some nice little veteran presence, especially there with Leah Varela, who I ended with. I wanted to kind of bridge it there a little bit. But then the defense will always be strong. As I mentioned, Izzy Peters, and I think Cam Closa, is coming back, where we think we'll get confirmation at some point. But it'll just be interesting to see if anybody actually transfers out, and just what the depth is going to look like if we do have some departures, then who gets brought in. Before we get to UTSA football, just want to take a quick little sideway trip here that we took over the weekend to Stephenville and watched your Tarleton State Texans take on North Alabama. Yeah, it sounds as exciting as many of you probably think it is. Or you guys are like, first of all, who is Tarleton State? Well, they're located in Stephenville, and they're part of the Texas A&M system. Who's North Alabama? Who cares? They weren't very good. It was a really cool experience to be there in Stephenville, though, because we got to see some things from a different point of view, basically an FCS level. But still, I think that while the matchup maybe doesn't sound exciting to others, I will say that at least Tarleton won 61-0.
Yeah, Tarleton is having a season somewhat similar to that 2021 season for UTSA, where they were undefeated for a long time. They have one loss to their rival, which is Abilene Christian. And, they had this great win against North Alabama, kind of bouncing back. They've got one more game this season, and they're ranked number 5 in the FCS. They look to be a lock to make their second playoff appearance in a row, which is huge because this is only the second year that they've been eligible to participate in the FCS playoff. So it's really great. to see them have this amount of success so early in their transition.
And it is cool because they've been able to build some like not only success like you were talking about, but also kind of a foundation of moving the program forward. Because I know that they've had some thoughts on going up to FBS. I'm not sure if that's ever going to, like, how soon that would happen. It's, I'm sure at some point FBS is going to get capped or things are going to split, blah, blah, blah. But we did learn some things about Tarleton State itself in terms of some of its funding.
Yeah, it was great to see the amount of investment that the Texas A&M system has been pouring into Tarleton State, primarily with their athletic facilities. It's really a big contrast in how the Texas A&M system has been funding and supporting Tarleton State as compared to how the UT system is treating and funding UTSA. If you look at Tarleton State, they just completed building an 8,000 seat event center for basketball and volleyball. Their former facility was very similar to the Convocation Center in terms of when it was built,
yeah, it was.
the capacity, what it looked like. So just kind of picture the convo. And then Texas A&M is funding completely this $110 million investment in this event center that just opened. It's really kind of what people want from UTSA in terms of, getting a new event center to replace the Convo. They've also invested in the football stadium, so they've expanded that. They've done other facility renovations in the last 5 years for baseball, softball, and soccer. It was just kind of like going in and looking at everything, and it's brand new and shiny and renovated, and it just really was incredible to see how much investment has been put into this program really in the last 5 years.
I did really like the football setup because it was a lot like the Colorado State football stadium where you walk, you go in, you scan your ticket, and you kind of walk up, and you kind of go to this kind of second level, and to go to your first level seating, which where we were at, you just kind of walk down the stairs, and it obviously a lot like the Dome. I'm not trying to make this huge comparison here, but the split level was really cool because it kind of gave the concourse some space, and you were able to just kind of walk around a little bit. And I can imagine, like, when it's completely filled, obviously for North Alabama, it wasn't going to be completely filled, but there was still quite a few people in attendance. And it was just a cool environment. Obviously, it's different than what we get on a FBS level. So to see it from a different lens, always kind of an appreciation of what, some other schools are doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in a lot of ways, it was, looking at what you would hope UT would want to do for their system schools.
Well, one of the things also to keep in mind here too is that a lot of these Texas A&M schools they're very much like FCS. If we're just going to go and see it on a football level, I would say they're all like FCS level schools and lower. So it may not be as dramatic as UT and having quite a few FBS level football programs. So yeah, there is I think a caveat there, but you do see that with Tarleton State wanting to go to the FBS level, as I kind of talked about earlier, you see that the contrast of why you probably wouldn't want to invest from the UT side, because there would be competition and may take away from the mothership.
All right, well, let's transition over to UTSA and Charlotte. The drought is finally over. UTSA picked up its first conference road win in more than 2 years, beating Charlotte 28-7, but it certainly wasn't pretty, despite what the scoreboard might have you believe.
When I say this, it's going to mean two different things, but still, I think it's safe to say that it wasn't an impressive showing, but I don't really believe that we needed impressive. This is akin to essentially UTSA going on the road to an FCS level school, kind of like we're talking about with Tarleton here, and playing him on the road. And, it's one of those situations where you feel like it should be a bigger score line, kind of like what Tarleton had versus North Alabama, where you'd want UTSA to just beat up on Charlotte 61-0. But certainly a lot of things that were frustrating about this UTSA win that I think, we do need to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the score was 7-0 at halftime. So the fact that the score was that close was a big concern. But prior to this week, he talked about how his team was not mentally tough when they played on the road. After this game, he said he was proud because they were mentally tough in this game. And he talked about kind of the environment that they played in. But my concern is just there were cultural issues that we still saw in this game, even though we got the win. The first being that there just didn't seem to be any juice or excitement on the sideline. Even when we started to really, build some momentum in the second half, there were lots of shots on television of Coach Traylor either seething on the sideline because his team wasn't playing well or made a mistake, or just there was a fumble at one point in the game and they panned over to Jeff Traylor and he just kind of slumps over and puts his hands on his legs, and you can just see how annoyed and frustrated he is at that moment. So those things, the way that he was reacting in the game, tells me that there wasn't mental toughness.
Yeah, welcome to UTSA fandom, Jeff Traylor. That's how we felt like watching not only this game, but other games at times. It does get frustrating, but really more than that, when you were talking about sort of like this body language from the team, I think that's the problem, that from a UTSA fan's point of view, we just don't understand. Like, this team earlier in the Jeff Traylor tenure had that energy and that juice to want to be out there. And now it just feels like they're taking this businessman approach, but playing like a stuffy businessman and not like having fun playing football. It looks like it's a chore when they go on the road.
Yeah. And then there was this moment that I'm sure everyone has seen now on social media where Devin McEwen had kind of taken a tough hit, and you see Darrell Jones kind of go in to defend McEwen because, he's trying to take care of his boy. In the response, Darrell gets a penalty. And so Owen kind of walks over to him after that to try to kind of pull him away from the situation and calm him down. And you see Darrell sort of hit Owen's hand away from him. Kind of, you can't see what he's saying, but it gives you the impression that he's like telling Owen, like, get your hand off of me or back away from me or something like that. And, after the game, Owen kind of played it down. It's probably not a situation where there's this huge tension between the two of them, but it was one of those situations where in the moment you have an undisciplined response to what's happening on the field, both in how he responded to the situation with Devin McEwen and then how he responded back to Owen when Owen was kind of trying to come and settle him down.
It's the optics. I mean, we started talking about the body language, the optics of not having any sort of energy, and then the optics of a camera zooming in on, our offensive guard and our quarterback, and, seeing, the slapping of the hand away or just moving the hand away. And it doesn't send a good message. We've talked about earlier in the season how it looked like the culture was really fraying, and maybe this is just the continuation of it. I mean, we'll see, after the season how things move in terms of, transfer portal. But you could see that if there still are like cultural issues and guys just not respecting each other like this, that there's gonna be some guys that'll be gone.
Yeah, and I think it all kind of is summarized then by the fact that they were talking about the triangle of toughness, and they panned in on a picture of the triangle, and it just looked kind of beat to hell. On the one hand, you can think about it like, oh, well, that's great because maybe it's beat to hell because, the defense has gotten all these turnovers. But we know that's not necessarily the case this season. It just looked like, I mean, they have, but it's not,
sure.
not like they've gotten enough to make it look like that. But it just kind of symbolized, I think, the cultural issues that we've been concerned that might be manifesting themselves.
Sure. I
mean,
you're right. It's a broken culture, and you can see it there, and that's a great look at it. I'm not. It's just the way you said it, so that's why I'm kind of riffing off that. But no, you're right. It's just looking at that, and it's that it's almost time to put it to bed, and maybe that's just either a new culture, a new voice. a call for something, I think, for this UTSA football team.
Ultimately, I think the thing that kind of captures this game the best was the ESPN commentator saying there were plenty of opportunities to score, but self-destruction was the order of the day.
Sure was. Well, let's just jump into the offense then, and let's get that going. I mean, it looks like the drops reappeared again. Houston Thomas dropped a pass down the middle that should have been a first down. It just looked, the offense looked sloppy. There was, I think, just a little disarray there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had some bad decisions. Owen has an interception that probably wasn't the best decision to make that throw. You have Robert Henry losing over 20 yards because he's basically running backwards instead of just going down. You have, again, that bad decision by Darrell Jones that we talked about earlier that then ended up pushing us back to a point where we had to kick a longer field goal and we missed it. And the fumble that we mentioned earlier as well, that was by Mekhi Anderson. It was just these little self-inflicted wounds or self-destruction, as the ESPN commentator said, that kept us from really getting into a rhythm and having a dominant game like we should have against a Charlotte team that was just completely struggling all night.
Yeah, and I think it really starts with the quarterback play and Owen McCown. I didn't think this was a very good game from Owen McCown. There was several passes that he had that were just off target. And what surprises me here, Atos, is that, okay, look, the stats are going to show 24 for 37, 306 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown, and then one interception on the day for him. And you think, okay, well, the one interception, I mean, guys, that's okay. But I think if you just actually watched the game and saw how things were transpiring, there was a reason why the offense was sputtering. It was Owen McCown. And usually as your quarterback goes, so goes your offense. And with Owen struggling, I guess I just go back to Atos, the fact that the Tulane game in the Dome, and maybe it's just the home game, magic, or whatever you want to call it. I don't think it's magic at all, but it's being at home that for some reason Owen's able to be more accurate, because he certainly wasn't accurate whatsoever at Charlotte. And I think that just, it compounded the issues that we saw.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the story of the Dome is and why everyone plays so much better there. But, the one person who did have a great game and is kind of the story of the game, if you will, was Will Henderson. He had 19 carries for 185 yards, 9.7 average, 1 touchdown, earned the conference honorable mention of the week. Just really an impressive game from him, and great to see his development since, we know Robert Henry will be out of eligibility this season. So it's kind of great to see Will Henderson growing up in front of our eyes and having that passing of the torch, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, he's a little bit faster than Robert Henry, which is weird to say because Robert Henry is pretty fast. But I think if you actually had them race, I think Will Henderson just kind of edges out Robert Henry. So that's why I'm saying he's faster. I'm going to say a half step if Robert Henry is listening, right? But for the most part, I think, yeah, what Will Henderson's been able to do, I think, in learning from Robert Henry, he talked about it post game with Andy Everett, where they asked him, well, you look kind of patient. Where did you learn that from? He said, well, Robert Henry, like, he's the one. And it's just kind of funny that Robert Henry talked about the beginning of this season, and really it was near the end of last season where he was really taught to be much more patient behind his blocking and let things develop. And I think passing that on to Will Henderson, you're going to see, I think, more of a Robert Henry type running back, and you will just see how he continues to develop. But obviously, Will Henderson's a talent. So I think pairing him up with Owen for the future is, you've got yourself another running back, and that's a good starting point.
Yeah, the other person who had a good game was Devin McEwen. He had 7 receptions for 100 yards and a touchdown. Again, he looked healthier in this game, looked kind of more similar to the Devin McEwen we saw at the end of last season.
They did have that fake tush push play where they handed it off to Will Henderson for a 59-yard touchdown. But let's be honest, they were calling it creative, and I was like, no, you stole it from South Florida. Let's give credit.
It was literally last game.
Yeah. Like, it wasn't creative. You stole it. It's just fine. Like, you'll get the kudos, Justin Burke. But I mean, and I don't mind him stealing this stuff, but it's just hilarious that you could have done that all season, or at least whipped that out at some point, even against South Florida. But no, instead, you wait to do it against Charlotte. It was a weird timing. Anyway, I think offensively, I think we've beaten them down enough. There were still some good performances. Again, like the offensive line, I'll say real quickly, they played pretty well. But again, you don't have a really stiff pass rush coming from Charlotte, and so you're not really going to get the offensive line going to get challenged very much. But speaking of which, let's talk about the UTSA defense, because they played well. And even though I'm going to say, well, Charlotte obviously on offense is inept and, just terrible, they didn't give up any stupid type of scores or, anything just that you normally see from UTSA defense, where they let their guard down and or lose their focus and allow just bad plays.
The fact that Charlotte didn't cross midfield until midway through the third quarter, and that they didn't get to the red zone until the fourth quarter, when I think that's when they threw the interception, is just crazy. I mean, again, it's that combination of just Charlotte being inept and not playing well, and the combination of our defense stepping up in a road game the way that we haven't necessarily seen them play on the road. I mean, they only had 4 missed tackles. They seemed to be a little bit more sound in their assignments, more focused. So,
yeah, I mean, I think, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but having such a bad offense that you're playing against can get you a little bit complacent. A word that we've heard before, that we've said plenty of times, but I'm just happy that the defense didn't get to that point. I just think that, and playing in the way they did, hopefully that kind of gives them a springboard for the rest of the season, and I know they're going to be at home, so that means they're going to be more physical and everything's going to have more juice, but still, I'd like to see them continue to play this way, flying around the way they kind of, they pretty much were going into next season.
Yeah, definitely. And they're going to have 2 tough teams that they're going to be facing soon, but I think we have to call out a couple of individual performances that stood out on the defensive side. Tyan Milton got his 2nd interception of the season. Not only did he get the interception, he returned it 50 yards, which, set us up for some good field position at that point. And then we had 4 sacks. It was interesting, though. I couldn't see exactly how they were all credited. ESPN shows 4 sacks. But then they have 1 for Kenny Ozawa, 1 for John Jones, and 1 for James Wally. So I'm not sure where the 4th sack came from.
Well, I think the game book only shows 3. So I think someone at ESPN just fat-fingered it and went 4.
So we had 3 sacks then. Yeah. 3 or 4, depending on your source. But, overall, seeing that they were able to get to the quarterback and we didn't have to rely on Nana to be the only one, I thought was, impressive for this game. And again, hopefully something that we can see in the next 2 games, because while we will be at home, both ECU and Army are going to be tough opponents that we're going to face.
Let's talk about the special teams to kind of wrap this up.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about special teams and the things that went well for them. And unfortunately, this was just not a great night for special teams.
Yeah.
We missed 2 field goals. One, Coach Traylor said, was just Petro miskicking it. The other one, he said, was due to a timing error on the snap count. But I think the biggest thing is just their Night Stalkers giving up the kickoff return touchdown, which we haven't seen a lot of those, in UTSA history. And, certainly the returner did a really great job breaking through some tackles and, kind of making a couple of moves, a juke, but certainly not what you want to see. I mean, that was the only touchdown that Charlotte got of the night.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because you look at it and your offense and your special teams don't have very good games. You would imagine that would turn into a loss. And we've talked about it throughout the year when UTSA has lost, that usually 2 out of their 3 phases of the game have done a bad job. And maybe 1 is okay, or maybe all 3, have suffered. But this one, I think you have to just look at the defense playing really well and the special teams and offense. Hopefully they can pick it up for the next couple games. Well, let's get to our East Carolina preview. Hey, Jobs, this is a program that we're familiar with because we did go to Greenville last year. And when we did go, we saw a different coach there for East Carolina.
Yeah, again, we talked about it throughout the season and through the preview that we were going to face a lot of these teams with either a new coach or a new quarterback. And in this case, it's both. After UTSA played at ECU last year, and ECU won. Shortly thereafter, they fired Mike Houston and promoted Blake Harrell, who was their defensive coordinator. He's been the head coach since then and has been 12-4 since becoming either the interim or the head coach. It's his 6th year with the program, but his first full year as a head coach. And ECU really looks like a different team, and they seem to really be thriving under Coach Harrell.
Yeah, they're 7-3 overall, 5-1 in conference. They're tied for second place in the American Conference, which kind of puts them in a good position for the American Conference championship game. So that's one thing that I think we're going to rehash a couple times during this preview. They did open up as a 3-point favorite, though I think I've seen it drop a little bit to 2.5. I think, obviously the quote unquote magic in the dome is taking into effect for the bettors. But let's start off by talking about the offense.
Yeah, their offensive coordinator and quarterback coach is John David Baker. He's in his 2nd year. He has a lot of Texas ties. He went to high school at Lake Travis High School. He played quarterback at Abilene Christian. So I think it's probably fair to say that the coaches on our staff are going to be pretty familiar with him.
Yeah.
And again, he was the offensive coordinator last year when we played them. And then let's not forget, former UTSA offensive line coach Matt Maddox is still with ECU.
Interesting. Let's talk about some stats with the East Carolina offense. They put up 466.3 yards per game. That ranks 14th in the nation. So this is a good, stout offense. They do a lot of it through the air, but I think it's because it's based off the run. So the run sets up the pass for them. And we saw that a lot last year, though they were pretty ineffective on the pass. They've got a better quarterback, though, which we'll preview here pretty soon. They do score about 33.6 points per game, which ranks 29th overall in the nation. But I think the biggest thing here at Tovs is that their third down conversion rate, because they convert 51% of the third downs. They extend drives. So this is going to be crucial for UTSA's defense to find a way to get them off the field, because when you look at their ranking, they're 10th in the nation. When UTSA has played an offense that ranks that high, they really have a lot of problems getting them off the field, and that leads to a more tired defense and just keeps our offense off the field. Fourth down conversion rate, I will say this, East Carolina struggles there. They've only converted 37.5% of their opportunities, and that ranks 119th in the nation. So pretty bad. UTSA is not that much better in terms of fourth down conversions on offense. So it'll be interesting to see just how this plays out. But I think if you can get East Carolina off the field on third down, I don't think you're going to see a lot of fourth down opportunities for ECU, at least to call. So let's talk about some key players.
Caton Hauser is their senior quarterback. He took over after Jake Garcia was benched after the UTSA game last year. Caton is kind of a gunslinger. He has a 66% completion rate, 2,801 yards on the season, 15 passing touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He also has 7 rushing touchdowns, though. I wouldn't say he's really a dual threat quarterback. He's more of the kind of quarterback that can take off when he has to. I mean, when you look at his rushing stats, he has 100 yards rushing. So it's not really an impressive amount of yards, but he certainly can take off and can get those extra yards when he needs to with his legs.
He's more Owen McCown than Frank Harris.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that kind of sticks out to me with Caton Hauser is when you talked about him being a gunslinger, like Jake Garcia felt like more of a gunslinger as well, but with just worse completion rate.
Yeah, so he's a more accurate gunslinger than Jake Garcia.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to get to here is the fact that, last year Caton Hauser really struggled coming into the offense. He had he had like double-digit interceptions, and when he would get down into the red zone, he really struggled. So maybe we can, force some of those struggles again. Obviously we had the lead last year going into halftime. Again, different quarterback, but hopefully maybe we can kind of press Caton Hauser a little bit and force him into some of these issues.
Yeah, the two wide receivers that you need to keep an eye on, they both have the last name Smith, although they do not appear to be related. The first is Anthony Smith. He's a senior wide receiver, 6'3". UTSA fans might recall him from last season because he had a huge 53-yard touchdown reception in the third quarter that kind of felt like it started to put this game out of reach for us. It was kind of like that backbreaker last season.
Yeah.
For the season this year, he has 51 receptions for 745 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a 14.6 average. Yannick Smith is the other Smith to keep an eye on. He's a sophomore wide receiver, not just has the same last name as Anthony. They're also about the same height, 6'3". He has 44 receptions for 583 yards, 5 touchdowns, and a 13.3 average. He got injured in their last game when they played Memphis. It sounds like he's probably okay and good to go for this game because Coach Harrell did mention that they could have put him back in the game against Memphis if they had to, but they just chose not to. So I'm assuming that means that he's going to be available, but you just never know.
I want to bring up this wide receiver, Brock Spalding. He's their third leading wide receiver. I've got no stats on him, but I just wanted to point out that if you look at his picture on the ECU athletics website, he looks like an early 2000s movie villain, maybe just a movie villain just in general. It cracked me up because I wanted to see some stats from him, but that won me over, and I want to see.
Stats just don't matter.
Yeah, who cares? Like, that guy just looks like he's gonna find a way to take over the world, and he's ready. He's hatched a plan already and needs some henchmen. So anyway, that's just a fun little aside.
All right. Well, London Montgomery is their sophomore running back, 128 carries for 638 yards, 7 touchdowns. He averages 5 yards a carry. He has some nice acceleration in his running style.
Yeah, when I saw him, kind of break a couple runs, you could see the acceleration away from, defensive backs and some linebackers. So something to keep an eye on. He's probably going to look a little bit faster in the dome because of the fact that he's playing on, essentially turf, whereas at East Carolina he plays on natural grass, and so it's going to be a little bit different. So it's certainly a guy to watch out for, and a guy that the UTSA defense is going to have to make sure to tackle. So you were talking about the fact that they really didn't have many missed tackles against Charlotte. Well, they're going to have to wrap up and make sure that they get Montgomery on the ground. Now, one of the things that I think that holds this East Carolina offense back a little bit, and I've already talked about how good they look stats wise, but I think their offensive line it's quite average for an offense that is as good as theirs. I would have imagined that they would have had some better stats off, on that OL, but it didn't look like it graded out very well. A little bit lower than I expected for the way that they have been able to get up and down the field. So,
and for what we know from Matt Maddox.
Right. So kind of interesting. I mean, I didn't really dig into why the offensive line is in the state it is, but just something to watch out for as this defensive line for UTSA goes up against it and tries to find a way to put pressure on Hauser. Let's talk about the defense, Tobes.
Yeah, so they have a new defensive coordinator, Josh Aldridge. He's in his first year with the program. He was previously a position coach at Auburn, took over after Coach Harrell was promoted this year. It was interesting in an interview this week, Coach Harrell said that he thought UTSA's defense was very similar to ECU's difference in terms of their fronts and style of play. So we'll just have to keep an eye on and see how that plays out. But they have been fairly disruptive. They have 6 interceptions as a defense overall.
Yeah, I mean, they've always been pretty stout defensively. I mean, Blake Harrell had a pretty good squad that he was directing under Mike Houston. And then, obviously, he gets this the the reins of the East Carolina program, and here we are, right? He's still making sure that he's got a good stout defense. So let's get to some stats here. They allow 339.1 yards per game. It's 43rd in the nation. It sounds like that ranking is, okay, but you think about 136 FBS schools, and you're like, all right. UTSA is, I think, in the high 380s. So about a 50-yard difference between, UTSA and UTSA's defense and East Carolina's. So just something to kind of watch out for. Here's the thing, though. East Carolina's defense is very good at not allowing scores. They only allow 18.3 points per game, which is 15th in the nation. You're talking about ranking up there with some of the top P4 schools in the nation. They're very stingy. On third down, they get offenses off the field, which doesn't bode well for a UTSA squad that has at times struggled. Now, I know they haven't really struggled in the Dome, but, an ECU defense with 30.1% conversions allowed on third down puts them ranked 8th in the nation, and that in itself is daunting. So if you want to get, I guess, the best of the ECU defense, potentially it's on fourth down, where they allow 39.3% of the conversions, but even that is ranked 19th in the nation. So a stout defense here, Atos.
Some of their key defensive players include Raheem Craig. He's a senior linebacker. He has 3 passes defended and a sack. Zion Wilson, one of their senior defensive linemen, leads the team with 5 sacks and 8 tackles for loss.
I looked up Zion Wilson. Boy, he looks like a monster, man. Like, I would say that our offensive line is in for, some work that they're going to have to do on Zion, because Zion looks like he's going to cause a lot of havoc. And if he's able to make an impact in this game, this puts this UTSA offense potentially behind the sticks at times.
Another player to keep your eye on is Jamarly Riddle. He's their sophomore cornerback. Interestingly, he's the one that leads the team in solo tackles and total tackles. He also has 5 passes defended and 2 interceptions.
And then I saw cornerback Tymeer Brown. He just kind of graded pretty high in pass coverage on PFF. So, I checked out a little bit of his film, and yeah, I mean, last year they had some pretty good cornerbacks. And because of it, it helped them, limit the amount of passing yards. So it's going to be a tough defense. This isn't certainly, I think, one of the better defenses that UTSA's offense is going to face at home this season. Atos, let's talk a little bit more about their special teams.
Their special teams coordinator is Ryan Smith. He was previously at Minnesota. In terms of key players, you have Nick Massey. He's their senior kicker. He was a transfer this year from New Hampshire. He's fairly consistent. He has 86% of his field goals made. He did miss a short field goal, one under 30 yards, but then he also missed one long field goal over 50. And his long overall is a 50-yard field goal. So he's solid, but not necessarily, I think, probably has the biggest leg. And then another person to keep their eye on, I didn't really know where to put him. He's sort of their jack of all trades. A little bit like the Brendan Brady of old for us, but maybe even more so because he plays both offense and defense and special teams. The point is, if you see Mike Wright, number 11, on the field at any point in time, whether it's special teams, offense, defense, keep an eye on him. He's listed as a quarterback on the roster, and he has offensive stats, passing, receiving, and rushing. He also has defensive stats, though. He has played cornerback at times, to include an interception last week against Memphis. But on special teams, he's also punted twice this season for ECU. So again, you might see him in a situation that could be a trick play. They might put him out, where it looks like maybe they're going for fourth down and they punt. Just don't really know what you're going to get when you see Mike Wright on the field. So
Interesting. Well, Atos, you want to get to the Hail Mary predictions?
This is going to be an interesting game because you have ECU that is playing to stay in the conference title race, and you have UTSA that is playing to get to bowl eligibility. Advanced stats favor ECU to win by 6, and like we mentioned before, Vegas opened at 3. The margins, though, aren't taking into account the magic of the Dome, I think, and how UTSA just seems to play at a different level. And at times, I think sometimes our competitors come in and maybe discount the level of competition that they're going to get from UTSA in the Dome, or, maybe they get intimidated by that, conference record of, 24 games won in the Dome in conference. But this is going to be an interesting matchup. It's a much better ECU team than we played last year in Greenville. They should win the game based on everything I've just said, but I'm going to give the edge to the magic of the Dome, and I'm going to predict a win for UTSA to get to bowl eligibility, 34-24.
I don't know if there's any magic in the Dome. I mean, you're supposed to win your home game, so I don't know if there's magic. It's just we somehow play better. But it's got to end at some point, and I believe East Carolina is the one to end the undefeated conference home winning streak. East Carolina has something to play for. You've talked about it already. It's that spot in the conference championship game, and as long as they win out, then they'll have that opportunity to do so. And I just think Blake Harrell has East Carolina playing just really well. He's given them some energy. He has East Carolina in a spot that Mike Houston wishes that he had been able to put this program at. And I just don't believe UTSA has enough here. So give me East Carolina 38-34 over UTSA.
Before we go, let's talk about the big news in the American Conference, which were two big games that had conference championship ramifications this past weekend. The first was Navy knocking off South Florida 41-38. That effectively put South Florida out of the conference championship and out of the college football playoffs.
Golish pulled a Ryan Silverfield. I'm not really sure what's going on here, but for some reason, you've got South Florida dropping a game that they shouldn't have. I mean, Navy's good. Don't get me wrong. It's just that to lose that focus and everything that you've done all year, South Florida all of a sudden just starts kind of falling apart at the wrong time.
Yeah. The other team that, of course, you've alluded to, and we've already mentioned that they lost, was Memphis. They lost to East Carolina 31-27. Again, that loss knocks Memphis out of the conference championship discussion, but again, leaves ECU in the mix.
I think this is year 6 of Ryan Silverfield, if not year 7. And with all those resources, I'm going to say it again, he can't get them to the conference championship game. I don't understand how Memphis is as good as they want or think their program is, that they haven't let go of Ryan Silverfield. And I don't know why a P4 school would want Ryan Silverfield. The guy he just cannot win. I mean, I get it. He's put up some really good records, right? But ultimately, with those records, you expect to see conference championship games, but he's not doing it. So will he ever? I don't think so. I mean, I think you've got the best out of Ryan Silverfield. I think Memphis should be hoping that a P4 school comes in and swipes them and they can move on, because I just don't see what the big deal is about Memphis.
Yeah, so if you're keeping track, that means that Tulane, Navy, North Texas, and ECU are the last 4 teams in the hunt with only one conference loss. So it's going to be interesting to see, what happens this weekend and next weekend, because there's going to be some big games. There's going to be a couple of these teams playing teams that they should beat. But at this point, after watching South Florida lose to Navy, anything can happen.
All right, well, let's pivot back to UTSA and get talking about the UTSA basketball teams. You alluded to it earlier that they're getting revved up. So let's first talk the men's basketball team. They lost to Texas State, 80-69.
Yeah, again, you always want to beat your rivals. I think had they played Texas State maybe a couple of games later, this might have been a little bit of a closer game. Coach Clonch said that this game against Texas State was the worst first half of basketball that UTSA has played this season. And they just dug themselves a hole. They were down by 12 at half. And while they played much better in the second half of the game, once you get down double digits on the road, it's hard to overcome that kind of deficit.
Yeah, no, you're right. I don't know what the identity of this team is just quite yet. You would hope that with the length that they have, that they'd be able to turn it up on defense a little bit more, and that would kind of create some easy baskets for them. But you haven't really seen that, and I think on offense at times they just get in such disarray. So look, they're new to each other, and I think they're still trying to learn each other, which is not a bad thing. It's just you just don't want to lose to Texas State, right? Like this is just another loss.
Yeah. It's never good to lose to Texas State. And unfortunately, they only shot 39% that game. But they bounced back in their next road game. They got their first road win of the season against Denver, 84-79. In contrast, Clonch said that that was the best first half of basketball for his team compared to, the worst first half that they had the game before. In this game, I thought was interesting because you see them go from shooting 39% against Texas State to jumping to shooting 51% in this game. And they just seem to kind of come out with a different fire. They let Denver get back in the game in the second half, but they were still, in a position where they could overcome it.
Well, they hung tough and were able to put that game away. So that was, I think, one of the more important things here. And this was honestly a Division I game, so that was even more important because it was also the first Division I win of the season. So, certainly a good thing for UTSA to continue to build on, and at least gave us some hope as the season kind of starts to rev up, as we've talked about, and kind of head into this next game.
Yeah, and I thought, before we moved to the next game, one of the things that was really impressive in this game against Denver was to see Bob Jai come off the bench to end up leading the team, 23 points, 12 rebounds. Coach Clonch talked about, Bob in his press conference this week and how he has really developed and taken a big step from his freshman year to his sophomore year. And they have an opportunity with Bob to kind of play him in a couple of different positions, but he seemed very encouraged and impressed by Bob's performance. And they also had two other players in double figures in that game. Jameer Simpson had 20 points and Austin Nunez had 16 points. But, I think overall getting that first road win against a Division I team in November was the thing that Coach Clonch was really excited about, because that didn't happen until mid to late December last year for his first team.
Yeah, and you're seeing improvement. I mean, today they played Southwest Christian, winning 103-70. I got to watch some of the game. Southwest Christian was much better than Biblical Studies. So,
those two are in the same conference.
Yeah, but I mean, you could tell the difference. Southwest Christian looked much more organized. They had a little more size than Biblical Studies, and they just look like they were going to be a tougher out for UTSA. And while it was a 33-point win, UTSA was sloppy in the first half. I don't really understand, because at times the guys are just bypassing open players. And I think it's just them recognizing, make that extra pass. Sometimes, you could get to being too unselfish and you don't get the shots off, but there were plenty of times where they just weren't doing that. And it just was frustrating to me, because it's like, I know that Southwest Christian, you could take some of these guys one-on-one and you could score, but that's not the purpose. The thing is, you need to be able to build on an offense by giving an extra pass, swinging the ball around a little bit. And you saw that a little bit more as they went into the second half and they started pulling away. But they can't take like till halftime to get there, right? So that's I think is the frustrating part. But I think it's at least something to, again, continue to build on, and hopefully, they shoot 53%. So I think they're in a good spot moving forward.
Yeah, next up for them, they have the Jacksonville Classic Thanksgiving week. So they're off this week. And then they'll be playing Abilene Christian on Monday of Thanksgiving and Georgia Southern on Tuesday. Well, let's transition over and talk about women's basketball.
Sure. They unveiled the regular season championship banner last week. And Coach Aston got her 350th career win because, hold on there, Atos, we beat Texas State in something this season.
Yep.
Beat them 64-41, absolutely rolled them. The score looks a lot closer than the game really was. I mean, Texas State just really, really struggled. There was really no home court magic or anything like that. It was just UTSA played well, and Texas State was just abysmal. And they dug themselves into a hole, and UTSA just took advantage. This is we talked about it several times about this team being shorthanded, and you could have made the case that how are they going to handle this adversity with only having like 8, maybe 9 players, able to suit up for a game. And, I'll give them credit, despite any of the wins or losses to this point, they have brushed it off and they just continue to go out there and play hard. And that's one of the things, obviously some of the young players are having a hard time trying to get to getting in a rhythm of playing at this level. But when you have players like Cheyenne Rowe and Mia Hammonds, I think you're in a good spot because they scored 16 apiece versus Texas State. And I got to say, Mia Hammonds just looks natural playing out there. She's just so smooth. And I've said it plenty of times, and I just want to keep talking about Mia because I think, she's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely. And then Cheyenne was recognized with conference honorable mention honors. She really has stepped up into that senior leadership role. Last year she came off the bench a lot, but she was kind of that sixth starter, as Coach Aston called her.
Yeah.
And really to see her just embrace that leadership role this season has been great. And I think that's exactly what this team needs. It was interesting, though, listening to Coach Aston in her weekly presser. She talked about the theme being embrace change and embrace hard. And she was speaking of the fact that you mentioned they have a lot of injuries this season, and, they're just having to play with younger players that maybe they thought they could not have as many minutes, early in the season. They're having to play through fatigue. And so she kind of talked about how they're trying to replicate some of that in their practice sessions so that, they can learn to play through fatigue, but really it's about embracing change and embrace hard. And I thought that was just, a great mantra for this team to have. And you saw that come to life in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully they continue to embrace that change and embrace the hard for the next few games in non-conference, because next up they're playing crosstown rival UIW, 7:00 on Wednesday on ESPN Plus. I think we're going to be trying to be there in attendance to see our UTSA Roadrunners in action. Hope to get some more information to pass on about the women's basketball team, because it's easy to just watch them on ESPN Plus, but to watch them live, you can usually hear nuggets about what's going on. So that's why I like the in-person stuff.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on the Hail Married podcast. I'm Atovs.
And I'm the Toves.
We'll be back soon to recap our game against ECU and bring you more basketball news.
Birds up.